time on my part providing a bio. The bios for each individual will be in the chat box. And so at this point, I would like to turn it over to Rita from Battle River to start her session.
Thanks, Wilco, and good morning, everyone. Well, when this all began, I certainly did a quick search for that manual as how to lead during a pandemic, and I wasn't very successful. So I decided that we just better figure it out on our own. And so we've tackled this whole process through a very consistent approach, focusing on communication. So everything that we did focused on quality school leadership, and in turn to focus on keeping quality teaching and optimum student learning through this pandemic. And we did this through weekly meetings with our school admin and our division leadership. So every week we met either through Google Meet or Zoom and discussed different strategies, talked about how things were going, that kind of thing. And then I also kept communication lines open with parents. So every 10 days to 2 weeks, I communicated in a parent letter that our schools distributed, just to let parents know that we were there for them, to try to update them on how things were going, to provide support that way, as well as with all staff groups. Since we couldn't be together, then I tried to keep communication open there too, to let them know how things were going and how we were proceeding. And so with the focus through our entire planning and reentry focus, our learning team has done that work. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shan, and she's just going to give a brief overview of what our reentry plan looked like.
Thanks, Rita. I was just thinking about that saying the learning, the expertise is in the room. Well, for us, the expertise was in the Zoom. And we were very fortunate to have our leadership, our division leadership team and our school-based leaders work together. And we have had, I think it's 7 kind of formal sessions around now. And the first one that we started off with was our inclusion team. And they had our FSLWs and our mental health capacity building team supporting them. And they used Battle River as an analogy for the work that we have done so far and the work that we need to continue to do, and that we need to be persistent in achieving our division vision, which is every student, every day, a success. Claudine, I'll get you to change the slides. Our first session really focused on closure and bringing closure to this year and understanding the trauma that many of our students and staff, all of them really, have gone through, and how do we acknowledge that and recognize people for their hard work and the things that they have managed to do during this difficult time. And so we spent a full admin meeting on that, and our admin brainstormed different ways that they could support their staff and different things that their staff had gone through. And as a division, we made a decision to present all of our students and staff and
our speaker is okay though.
The certificate, recognizing the 3 months and the work that they did, and having some type of recognition ceremony for that. The next session was a review of what is the foundation of the work that we're doing in the division. How have we worked to date to ensure that every student every day is a success, and that we are providing quality leadership. And that foundation is safe, caring, and welcoming buildings and relationships. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that and talking about the context we'll be looking at in the fall and the work that we will need to do to ensure that those are in the forefront and are continuing and being built on. We also then moved into what type of environments we may be faced with in the fall, and planned around all of the scenarios and just the different ways that we could be supporting staff and students to move forward in their learning. Then we met with just our division leaders, all of the requirements of reentry, and kind of said, how can we take some of this work off of our school leaders' plate so that they can be focused on the learning piece in their buildings. And so We divided a lot of the tasks amongst us as a division leadership, and then we shared that with our school leaders just recently so that we could kind of relieve some of the stress we knew that they were feeling, and tell them and give them ideas around how we were going to support them. All of the sessions that we've had, we have in a Google folder that's called Admin Reentry. We've labeled the sessions according to their order, and all of the discussion notes from those meetings are in there, along with resources to support our schools. And we've asked our schools to take the key ideas from those sessions that we've had with them and use them at the school level to support their staff and ensure that their staff feel that they have ownership processes as well. And now we just wait and to hear what scenario we're actually going into. But I feel that going into summer, our staff overall feel that we have a plan, that they are supported, and that once the ministry introduces their final re-entry requirements, that we'll be able to move forward and ensure that our students and our staff are in a good place to learn. So I skipped a slide, Claudine, so you could. So, thank you. Rita, was there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's good.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move into the second panelist, which will be Sandy from Grand Prairie. Sandy?
Thanks very much, Wilco. And I'd like to say thanks to Val and team and Claudine and everyone for organizing this and for the opportunity to share today. We've all been thinking that we were planning for this whole event and now re-entry planning before we even knew it was coming. A little bit of background for Grand Prairie Public. The slide you're looking at shows the strategic priorities in our divisions, leadership, inclusion, and we've also been committed to prepare for prior this year and through the implementation of the new professional practice standards. So our focus and how we structured our language and a lot of restructured our practices and even our system leadership team structure has been focused on supporting our school administrators to be able to support our teachers, to be able to provide that optimum learning for students. Next slide, please, Claudine. If we had ominous music, this is where it would be playing. COVID really threw a wrench into things that were clipping along in Grand Prairie, and we thought we were having quite a successful year. And then we had to change pace. Everything continued as unplanned, though, because a lot of our discussions continued to focus on our strategic priorities, continued to focus on the need to support our administrators, to support our teachers, to help provide that optimum learning for all students. Next slide, please, Claudine. We are exceptionally proud in our division of the work that our system and school leadership and our staff did to respond to the hand we were dealt. We transitioned fairly quickly, and while we had to create a new structure, we were able to, I believe, and we've got feedback I'll talk about in a little bit, to continue to meet the needs of those students. We surveyed our parents, our staff, and our students to inform our re-entry planning. We had over 7,000 responses, and that's a rate of return that we've just don't typically get with respect to our annual surveys, certainly not our APORI surveys either. And it really informed the work that we were doing. As we moved forward planning for the 3 scenarios we were presented with for next year, we really wanted to make sure that we kept our priorities in order and that we kept our feedback from our parents at the front of our planning. Next slide, please, Claudine. Thank you. So much the same way we prepared for budget and in October again, and then again in February, March, April, We approached our reentry planning by looking at everything through the lens of our three focus areas, our three priority areas: teaching and learning, leadership, and inclusion. And we use inclusion as the catch-all term. What we're talking about there is meeting the needs of our individual students, but also ensuring that our schools are caring, safe, welcoming, and respectful learning places. And in the COVID environment, we're really focusing some of our preparations on that social emotional aspect, and ensuring the needs of our students and staff and parents are attended to. So we structured our thinking saying, what will teaching and learning look like in each of our three scenarios? How will we continue to provide support to leadership? What specific actions, structures, and changes do we need to make in each of the three scenarios? And how will we ensure that everybody sees inclusion as a priority under each of the three scenarios? And what we did was we asked for support from our principals and vice principals, and we had just about everybody was able to participate. And we broke up into three working groups. And if you could switch to the next and last slide, please, Claudine. Our working group 1 was focused on curriculum and instruction and assessment. And for the last 5-6 weeks, we've had a large committee of system and school leaders break into small groups, and they've taken a look at the essential outcomes at each grade level and each subject area. The intent was to create a document, and each of if there's any questions about what Grand Prairie Public is doing, I believe we'll have representatives in each of the three breakout groups as well. But the intent here was to create a document that can be referred to by any administrator or any teacher. We started thinking, wherever students go to school now, they may be in Grand Prairie Public next year. So we every year we have about 20% of our students are new. There's a lot of moving in and out of Grand Prairie. Every student, regardless of where they're coming from, whether they were with us or with someone else this year, next year will have had interrupted learning. So we wanted to make sure that we had that equity of access to the essential outcomes set up for next year. The document talks about the instruction, Tier 1 instruction, talks about assessment expectations, provides some guidance and direction about pre-assessments. Basically, we're trying to be efficient with our time, but in doing so, we want to also build the understanding of all of our staff to be able to contribute to building assurance for people inside our system, for parents, for students, and for the community that we remain focused on student learning in spite of all of the other things that are going on around us. Working group 2, also a big group, really focused on those structures, routines, busing, personal protective equipment, what we can do under each scenario with respect to physical distancing. And I expect there's a lot of similarities to certainly the exemplars I've seen from colleagues across the province, and the work I know others are doing, very similar to what we're doing there. We're very fortunate to have an occupational health and safety coordinator in our division and an HR director who are outstanding and have been able to attend to all of those legislative pieces. And I know Brownlee and McLennan Ross have been providing a lot of support in there. We've had people kind of focused on capturing all of the information from there, and then we bring it back to the large group. And the final group focused on inclusion and relationships. Really important work being done there, and really excellent work being led by our administrators in that regard. It doesn't matter how far apart we push our desks or what hygiene or personal protective equipment practices we put in place if our students or their families are nervous to come to school. So we really see this as the foundation, and that group actually broke into 5 subgroups. One subgroup's focused on...
Sandy, just if you could maybe have 20 seconds or so
yeah,
to wrap up. I figured you were almost done.
You betcha. This is the last bit. 5 subgroups. We're going to survey parents again in August, see how everybody's doing before we come back. We're looking at the tier instruction to support social emotional learning. We're looking at groups focused on working with community members. The 4th group's working on putting resources together for staff, and the 5th group's communication. And that's it.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. I think you might have been cutting out in those last few seconds, but we certainly appreciate what you've shared with us. Let's move on to Daryl from Edmonton.
Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here from Treaty 6 territory. Thanks for inviting me. If I'm sounding like I'm in the techno dance party, Welko, give me a wave because I can see you. I guess we'll just start. Next slide, please. Just start by, I'm not going to talk about how we responded to COVID back in March and all the processes and structure that we had in place. We're just kind of looking forward to reentry into September. We did an environmental scan of and monitoring of reentry among school boards in Canada and around the world. You know, that was about a month ago or so, and we've tried to keep up with that just to be aware of some of those best practices that are happening around certainly North America and even in Europe. We also did a reentry survey. We had approximately 74,000 respondents, and Sandy, we get that kind of response rate all the time with our surveys. No, that's a tremendous response rate. We had over 40,000 kids actually complete the reentry survey, which was, you know, I almost fell off my chair when I heard that. We heard obviously from just under 24,000 parents and over 6,000 of our staff. And just to give you a sense, we would have about 10,000 staff in our organization. So that's a pretty good response rate. Gives us a really good sample size. We had questions related to in-person learning, online learning, transportation, health and safety, just trying to give everyone an opportunity to sort of share what's on their mind initially and help inform our plans. And if you want to see that report, there's a summary report of that on epsb.ca. Anyone is welcome to go in and see that. Next slide, please. So we took a look at what are our guiding principles for reentry? Obviously, health and safety is significant in our work. Our relationships with our staff, with our students and families, community partners. We are an organization that is focused on the development of social capital for many, many years now. And those relationships, we believe, are fundamental to the success of our students. We are a collaboration, lots of collaboration within and outside the division. We're regularly engaging our principals and central leaders, and also, folks, community partners and parents outside the division, etc. Clear and frequent communication was something that we needed to have happen. People want to know sort of what's going on, and we're doing our very best to ensure that we're keeping folks up to date. And we implemented multidisciplinary planning committees based on the 3 scenarios outlined. And those scenarios obviously return to face-to-face. Second scenario is sort of a hybrid, a blend of online and face-to-face. And then third, the distance, continuing on with online learning. We have multiple professionals on each of those committees: HR, occupational health and safety, communication, curriculum. I mean, I could go and list all of our areas, but we've also had principals serving on each of those committees with a focus on each of those scenarios. And obviously within their units, there's lots of collaboration between scenarios happening as well. We are continuing to work on supporting access to technology for staff and students. I think we signed out over 10,000 Chromebooks for kids to use in response to late March and accessing that learning. And one thing I do want to highlight and chat about a little bit is our resource development project. And so we really looked at those 3 scenarios, and if we're moving in between scenarios in the fall, we think it's important to have a really good backbone for teaching and learning. And so, that being essentially an online platform, we really needed to focus on the engagement of students, because I think what happened in late March was an awesome response, and I'm incredibly grateful to our staff. But you know, let's face it, there was a huge learning curve with the development of those resources, and there's a lot of good pedagogy around effective student engagement related to online environments. And so what we've done is we've invested $4 million in the development of resources for the fall, and that'll be K through 12. And we're working with a number of divisions. And so if you have any bags of money, give me a call and let's talk. Only kidding, you know, whether you can afford it or not, you know, our plan is to ensure that we're sharing everything that we can after the fact. And I certainly know that if you want to put some sweat equity or some resources behind this, it would certainly be appreciated, because it's going to cost way north of $4 million. That work has already started, and those resources are going to look at, obviously, effective student engagement. There's going to be teacher videos with written instructions so that we can shift between online and paper-based resources. Obviously, our teachers are professionals, and they have the ability to augment the resources that we develop, and we certainly would encourage them to do so. But if we shift back to an online, let's say in mid-October or something, and don't get nervous, I don't know anything that you don't know, then we have a really good structure to support our teachers, and we felt that was absolutely critical. And so that work is going on, and certainly if you have any questions of that about that, let me know. Next slide, please. This is another key leverage point that I think I want to chat about here today. And so when we implemented our new policy around student behavior and conduct, as well as our work on assessment, we took the approach of creating guides that are published on every school in our division's website, easily accessible for parents. They know where to look for the information. And so we are preparing a COVID reentry guide template that will be posted on all of our school websites in August. The draft will be done sort of late June here, sometime next week. I'll get a look at it. And obviously, we're all waiting for further direction by the Chief Medical Officer of the province. We are going to ensure consistency in certain aspects of operations, you know, which with a specific focus on teaching and learning. That was one of the things that our survey uncovered, is that our parents were concerned about the inconsistency between the amount of online time between kids, quality of materials, that kind of thing. And so we're taking steps to address that. We are currently engaging principals to gather feedback on reentry for September. And so in every aspect of those operational plans, we're gathering feedback. We're trying to make sure that questions are answered, that direction is provided. And we're going to be providing some additional time for principals in August in recognition of an early return in the volume of work that they're going to be facing. I would anticipate our principals will be in schools early August, and it's going to be pedal to the metal until September. So those guides also allow for each of our schools to enter any site-specific information related to their particular circumstance. So it's a blend of consistent messaging in the division as well as that site-specific information, which we felt is really critically important to honor those school communities and the connections that our parents have with their school. And also it's an opportunity for our schools to collaborate and get some skin in the game, so to speak. And so to give everyone a fully cooked plan maybe isn't the very best approach in our division anyways. We need to get some input and help shape that. Go to the next slide, please. Obviously, there's lots of questions about procurement of sanitation supplies, and so we are going to be shooting out some RFPs around hand sanitizer and stuff like that. And as you know, in the province, we will structure those RFPs so that other divisions can sort of pile in on the buying spree and get the very best price that you can around some of the personal protective equipment that may be needed. We're working with our locals to ensure that we have the staff that we need to do the work. And so I would anticipate that many of our collective agreements in the province have language about evening shift and day shift and notification periods and all that kind of thing. Well, we're doing some proactive work with our local to make sure that we have the management rights that we need to ensure that we have the folks on hand to do the work that's needed. We're exploring the use of the capital maintenance renewal funding for anything that we can capitalize in terms of the equipment that we need in our schools. And obviously there are accounting practices and rules from the province around that. So we're examining that. And we are looking at cohorting strategies in a pretty significant way. So most, if not all, of our high schools in the fall, for example, will be going to a quarterly timetable. And so if you think of a high school student having a grade 10 student having 8 courses over the course of a year, they're going to carry 2 courses per quarter. And I know there's a CAS facilitated meeting with the province coming up, I think even tomorrow, to talk about quarterly systems. We have had a conversation with the ministry about access to the appropriate diploma examinations on a quarterly basis. And so this way our high schools are able to limit the numbers in a school and cohort our kids, you know, in an effective way to help sort of stop that spread of COVID as best as possible. And we're working with our board around any advocacy. And I'll give you an example of that. I'm anticipating that, you know, Ballpark will probably spend $6.5 million on COVID-related expenses in terms of hand sanitizer, masks, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know, we don't have a money tree planted in Edmonton Public. And so, you know, and I'm sure that you're all the same. You're probably wondering where you're going to get these resources. And so I think that there's an opportunity for some advocacy from our board, certainly. A couple other things I'll mention, and these aren't high leverage points, but
if we can
resources.
just wrap up in the next 15 seconds or so.
You betcha. We'll have a guiding document for pre-kindergarten reentry, which will have some specialized considerations. We'll have a guiding document for working with children that require specialized supports, that provide some supports around children that require, that have very complex needs. And last thing I'll say is the Metro divisions are collaborating on resources and supports for our staff that focus on the mental health and trauma that students may have experienced over the pandemic. So classroom resources, it's not like we're going to fire up on day one and say, okay, here's the Canadian test of basic skills. We want to see where you're at. They're going to have to ease into things with kids and pay attention to that trauma-informed practice. Thank you very much. I squeezed a bunch in 7 minutes.
Perfect. I know how tough that is. There's so much that's happening and so much valuable information to share. So thanks, Daryl. Let's move on to Daphne.
Wilco, can I just make a very quick comment?
Absolutely, Barry.
Sorry, Daphne. Just and Daryl and I have been playing telephone tag last night and this morning, and the comment he made about the learning guides was what I've been trying to call them. I did get some calls, Daryl, from a couple superintendents wondering about ability to sort of work with your district. I indicated past history is that Edmonton Public has always been interested in that, so I will connect with you and then be sending a more general message to all of the superintendents, including the ones that may not be here.
Sounds good, Barry. No problem.
Thanks, Barry. So let's transition to Daphne.
Anse. Okay, Anine, good morning, everyone. Greetings to all. I want to thank Cass for the invite. If you just want to go on to the next slide, I'm like thinking I'm going to have to probably squeeze as much as I can too into my presentation. So I just want to give you though a really brief background on who we are. As we are a fairly new education authority, we're the first in Alberta. We were the first in Alberta and the second in Canada of education authority of multiple First Nations. So Katuskinaw Tribal Council Education Authority, which we refer to as KTCEA, is an administration organization for 6 schools within 5 Cree First Nations in north central Alberta. So you can see it on the map there. So KTCA established to ensure that Loon River First Nation, Woodland Cree First Nation, Lubicon Lake Band, Whitefish Lake First Nation, and Peerless Trout First Nation receive an education within their communities that are responsive to strengthening the Cree in our schools, developing resources and courses, and of course focusing on student retention, attendance, literacy, numeracy, teacher retention, and improving student well-being through nutrition and athletic programs. Next slide, please. So we signed an historic REA with ISK, Indigenous Services Canada. We are federally funded, so we are, I think, the first to have signed an REA in Canada. And we are a 15-member school board. It's a large school board consisting of 5 chiefs and 10 counselors. We do have a PAC that have 2 elected parents, an elder, and two of their board members that sit on that. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to focus on where we started at with our restart plan. When COVID hit, we knew that communication was going to be key for us. And so within KTC, the Katuskanau Tribal Council, we started to meet with our 5 chiefs once a week. We had an established meeting. We met with our KTC council. Under the umbrella of KTC Council, we have KTC Health, we have KTC Child and Family Services, and Education. So we met twice a week because we knew health was going to be playing a key part in moving forward in our schools in those communities. We had lockdowns in our communities, so there was no access in or out almost immediately. And so we were very restricted because we had staff that moved in and out of those communities. So we established leadership meetings within KTC, and we met 3 times a week. And part of it was a business continuity. How are we going to continue our business with this COVID? And what is our restart? How are we going to focus on getting the kids back into school? We met with our principals once a week, and we also had, as we started the moving forward into the restart meetings, we met with the PAC, which is our parent advisory circles, and our staff, and so we had meetings with each of those communities. And so what we looked at was we wanted to look at what Alberta had started, and so we know that they had 3 scenarios, and we had a focus though more on looking at additional health and safety measures to be in place. So we had in our plan, what we're looking at is an in-school classes commencing for specific grade levels on a rotating basis. And we have that flexibility because we're federally funded, that our plan is going to be based on what the community, what the leadership sees as what they want in their communities. They have no cases in their communities, so they are very, very cautious of and want so much information on the approach that we are going to take, so that we knew we had to look into things, be cognizant of the fact that our families are at higher risk for serious illness, and we have students living in multi-generational homes with elders. So we had to be careful of that. So what we're proposing is that in-school classes commence for specific grade levels on a rotating basis. We know that fewer students in the schools at one time decrease the risk of transmission, and we are starting with the younger grades. At this approach, it's easier to manage and model social distancing, and it allows for safe routines to be developed in steps so that these routines become the norm, and it reduces the stress. Can you just go on to the next slide? Okay, so as part of our restart plan, we started to look at task teams. So the plan that we looked at 7 scenarios of going back into the school, and we chose a phased-in approach, and we presented that at our board meeting, and the board approved it. So there was task teams that have been established to address the priorities of engagement and communication to communities, because we have to communicate to 5 First Nations, parents and staff, classroom and school size measurements for physical distancing purposes. We looked at the budget, how is it going to look like, a health and safety plan, education program plan, a staffing plan. And part of our staffing, we have to look at, we have teachers that live in teacherages on the First Nations, and how are they going to, those that are coming from other areas or nations, want to ensure that they are coming in that are safe, that they are safe, so that we're going to be doing testing right at the get-go before the teachers get into the community. Building procedures, IT plan. We are going to have 1 device per student by September. Training plan, a transportation plan, a food services plan because we do provide a breakfast and lunch. And we all had to look at if those students were staying at home, how are we going to provide services for that? A student's support services plan and a full day K4 plan because we do have K4. And then our central office restart plan. So we had task force that have been working on each of these and ensuring that we're ready to go for September. Next slide, please. So under the KTCA restart plan, we have more like an accordion approach because if we know that there's this active case in a community, the community is going to shut down. We're going to have to go back to at-home schooling. Hence why we need to have one device per student. So we know also that our schools do not have enough classrooms with social distancing. So we're going to be doing rotating as well. And we know that we already surveyed all our parents as well. And I think about 80%, 70 to 80% are going to be returning to school and 20 to 30 are going to be staying at home. So we also have to be planning for those at-home students. So if you just want to go to the next slide. With this restart plan, our strongest leverage of point of success in this plan is engagement we have done with our KTC leadership, our staff, our parents, and communities at large. We have refined our approach based on what we heard. There's a strong interest in safety protocols for in-person learning, including the PPE, cleaning, social distancing, testing, transportation, and meal prep. Discussion and interest about how school will be set up for social distancing, and ideas on how to ensure success for at-home learning, including connectivity. Connectivity is a huge issue in our nations. We do not have connectivity in all the homes. There's like blackout zones where you can't even pick up a signal. So that is a challenge. We are dealing with that with ISC at the federal level. And we are hoping to have every household to have connectivity in September. Devices at home, parent orientation and supports, protocol for staff travel, including staff who commute daily from outside of the community, staff whose family reside off reserve, interest in a common timetable, and an update of the new school year calendar. So we're giving a week of more time for teachers to prep and also to be tested and also to get ready for this school when school commences. And we're ensuring that our plan can be flexible to change depending on what happens in the future. So next slide, please. Thank you for listening. I think that's it for me, and I'm not even sure where my time is, but we have really had an excellent team, and we really came together, and we really had to learn how to do Google Meets right from the get-go. I think our teachers have had a lot of, time. We grouped our teachers in PLCs, so they, right from the get-go.
Daphne, if you can maybe just wrap up there.
Okay. So from the get-go, we did have all our teachers connecting with each other, all the grade 3s across the system, grade 1s to 3s, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and then we had 2 high school PLCs, one for English and social studies, and one for math and science. And that's how we kept that connection, and we're going to keep that going come September as well.
Perfect. Great. Thank you very much, Daphne, and thank you to all of the panelists. I'm just going to turn it over to Rhonda to facilitate some questioning. Again, just a reminder, if you do have a question, if you can put it in the chat box, we'll only have an opportunity for a small handful, but we would encourage you to type some questions. So Rhonda, over to you.
Sure. I just want to start by thanking Rita, Shan, Sandy, Daryl, and Daphne. Obviously, the questions in the chat box are more affirmations of appreciating the documents that you're coming up with. But one of the things that came up across all 4 is that you've all established working groups in different ways, from a multidisciplinary approach to having different names for those groups. And there were some questions. And so I think one of the questions might be moving forward for CAS. I don't know that anyone specifically can answer it, is how are school authorities structuring working groups now and leading into school reentry? And I'm just going to sort of summarize some of the other things that came up and then a specific question that came up. In the chat box, you'll notice too, people are asking about sharing of surveys, but also just the documents. In each of the presentations, it was really clear, from trauma-informed practice to inclusive practices to how you're keeping your eye on the development of online resources. What are those documents that will come from that, and how might they be shared? Now, I see some specific questions are being answered by individuals saying, yeah, I'll share my survey and so on, but I think maybe that's a question for Barry and perhaps David Keohan. How might we share the documents and resources as they're forthcoming on the surveys, especially, and then the reports coming from those surveys? And then the next was specific to schedules. So I know it was a question for Edmonton Public Schools, but I have a feeling there's quite a number of people who can answer that or are starting to think about it. Regarding cohorting, what are we doing about options in high school? And also regarding cohorting, what is everybody doing regarding core and option classes for all levels? So that I would leave that question with the group. What are we doing about cohorting with respect to core and option courses? And we might want to start with Daryl from Edmonton Public, since it was originally directed to you, Daryl, regarding high school.
Sure, thanks, Rhonda. Obviously, cohorting options, cohorting of core classes is pretty straightforward. In our high schools, we would have, our largest high school is approximately 2,900 students, and then we have some smaller high schools at around, Old Scona would be around 400, and it's everything in between kind of thing. So for our larger high schools, obviously social distancing 2,900 students at Harry Ainley is a bit of a challenge. So we're looking really at a school within a school model. So we're dividing our students up into, and it could be even multiple schools within a school. And we're trying to keep that cohort of kids together for core classes as well as option classes, and try to still maintain the choice around options that we have. So if you can imagine a timetable where the morning is, your first course and the afternoon is your second course, you only have 2 courses to focus on for the quarter. You're going to be having contact time each and every day. Option classes will fit into that schedule as well. So you may only take 1 core class and 1 option in a semester. And we're just trying to, with a school within a school, limit, there's no strategy that I'm aware of in a 2,900 student school where you're not building a scattered timetable. So kids are going to have different contacts, within the day. And I think the advice of the chief medical officer is they are quite aware that social distancing is not going to be able to, be a reality in all of our schools. Cohorting is a strategy to minimize some of that impact. We're encouraging kids to wear masks. We're buying masks for our staff, reusable masks, as well as face shields if they'd like it. With that, morning afternoon schedule, they're not going to at least be going to 4 different classes over the course of a day, which would expand the amount of contacts that students would have. Alberta Health Services will do close contact tracing if we have an outbreak of COVID in one of our schools, and we'll work with with Alberta Health Services on that. And that's sort of the best we can do if the return is face-to-face for September.
Thank you very much, Daryl. And there was another question that came forward from Calgary. How do high schools moving to this quarterly system plan to prepare teachers? And how are we looking at sort of supporting teachers with this process? So I'm going to open it up to our panel and see if one of you would like to share on that topic.
I don't know, Rhonda. We're really anticipating this as a possible strategy we're going to use, but we're still just developing it. But I know there's others out there who have experience with this, and I'd really like to hear from someone who's practiced in this format.
going to interrupt. So we are about 5 minutes over schedule. We had indicated we would have a 15-minute break in here for people to kind of gather their thoughts and prepare for transition. Maybe we'll just kind of wrap up and give somebody a chance to maybe make a short comment on the answer to the question, and then we'll move into that short break.
I can take a crack at it, Wilco. It's Daryl from Edmonton Public. You know, the preparation of teachers is sort of a multifaceted question. And so we do know that there's some anxiety from our staff around returning to face-to-face classrooms in September, and we're going to be working on ways that we can mitigate that. In terms of preparing them for teaching and learning, I'll go back to the resource development project that we have. So you can appreciate that compressed schedule is going to create some challenges. If you've been teaching an 80-minute block for the last 20 years of Biology 30, you're sort of, you're geared up to do that. And so, through the resource development project, we hope to be modeling strategies around the delivery of more extensive periods of time for students. And so that's at least our strategy and approach.
Great. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Certainly, there'll be more opportunity for dialogue within your individualized sessions. I'm not sure, Val or Claudine, if there's any specific instructions, or Cheryl, that we need to give to individuals for transitioning to the roll-alike meetings.
I just have one request. If you could check your chat, there are a few people who were not assigned to breakout rooms, and I've just asked you to let me know which breakout room you would like to attend. Thank you.
So there is a comment from Barry as well, just in the chat box. I wouldn't mind sharing. There is an opportunity for those that are interested in the quarterly system. There is a session tomorrow, and there will be some administrators who have had our quarterly system for some time, providing some background. So that opportunity to further explore the quarter session is there. Certainly at 10 o'clock then we'll be transitioning for about 45 minutes or so into individualized roll-alike meetings. And if you are in the wrong meeting, there will be a button on the bottom of your screen that will allow you to leave the room, and it'll put you back into the main room, and then Cheryl will be able to help you. There are 4 sessions that you would have had an opportunity to sign up for under roll-alike. There's curriculum and assessment, and Amber Dara out of Horizon will be facilitating that one. There's one under operations and logistics, and that's Scott McFadden, Mark Francis, and Sean Boise from Parkland. There's a 3rd session, roll-alike opportunity for safe, caring, and respectful learning environments, being facilitated by Mike McMahon out of Fort McMurray. And then the last one would be a chief superintendent session. And so with that, we'll give people an opportunity to check email, respond to text messages, and we'll see you back in a few minutes in your individual sessions.